Good evening. As Dr. Osborne said, I'm Vicki Cullinan. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations. And presenting with me tonight will be Lyle Erstead, our Director of Facilities. Through our presentation, we will share with you information about the district's fiscal health, the condition of our facilities, and options for financing facility improvements. The topics we will cover are the district's revenue and expenditures, debt service, fund balance, information about our facilities and our needs, and options for financing. School districts from Illinois draw revenue from local, state, and federal sources. This pie chart illustrates the revenue received during our most recent fiscal year. Last year, we received about $91.2 million in revenue. And like most school districts in this area, we receive most of our funding from local sources, 90.5%. 84.9% comes from local property taxes and 5.6% from other local sources. While none of us enjoy paying property taxes, the one good thing about property taxes is that the dollars stay in the community, they directly benefit our students, and they provide a stable income flow for the school district so we can plan for the future. Other local revenue is generated from student fees, food service sales, facility rentals, and TIF payments from the Village of Lake Zurich. 7.5% of our revenue comes from state sources. The $2.2 million from general state aid is unrestricted funding that's provided on a sliding scale based on the amount of local property tax resources or wealth available to support a pupil's education. For District 95, we only receive about $368 per student in general state aid. The other portion of the state sources are funds to offset a portion of the expenses for required services such as transportation and special ed. The smallest portion of our revenue funding is from federal funds at about 2%. This comes in the form of block grants to support the National School Lunch Program and IDA funds for special education programs. School districts in the Collier counties are subject to the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, which is commonly referred to as the tax cap. This came into effect in Lake County in 1991. This law actually limits the increase of the district-wide tax extension to the Consumer Price Index, or 5%, whichever is less. Since the implementation of the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, the CPI has remained less than 5%. It can vary greatly from year to year. While you can observe a trend during the year, there's really no way to predict what the ultimate number will be, since it is simply the change from December to December. So in simple terms, school districts receive what they received in taxes the previous year, plus an inflationary component, which is the CPI, plus the value of new property. If property values did not change, everyone's bills would increase by the Consumer Price Index. But that's not what happens. Property values change individually. Some people appeal their property taxes and their property value goes down, their assessed value goes down, others it goes up. So you'll see variances in your tax bills. The three components that are used in the calculation to determine how much property tax the district can receive are the Consumer Price Index, property assessed valuation, or property wealth, and new property. This slide shows the historical Consumer Price Index for the last 20 years, and the average for the last 10 years has been 1.86%. When we do our budget forecasting, this number has the greatest impact, but has the least ability to be predicted. For a district that's highly reliant on property taxes for revenue, like Lake Zurich, the CPI has the greatest impact on determining our revenue. The second component of the revenue equation is the equalized assessed valuation, or the property wealth of our district. This component impacts the funding we receive from the state and the tax rate paid by our residents. It's not unexpected that this peaked in 2009, and then as a result of the economic downturn, the property values in our community declined until 2014. They increased in 2014, 2015, and we are projecting an increase in 2016. Our community here in the southern part of Lake County has fared much better than other portions of the county. The third component of the calculation is new property value. It's important to a school district since the first year it goes on the tax rolls, it's added after the extension, so it is additional value above the increase in revenue created by the CPI. In the years of low inflation, this is particularly important to the school district. So this gives a historical perspective of the value of property that was added to the tax rolls for Lake Zurich School District 95. So even despite the years of the economic downturn, we are fortunate to continue to have some new property values in our school district. This chart illustrates the district's total tax rate since 2003. So that's the line graph that gives you the total tax rate. And the blue bars represent the property values or property wealth in our school district. As you can see, the tax rate behaves inversely to the property values. So as the property values went up, the district's tax rate went down, and as the property values went down, the district's tax rate went up. And this is to generate that tax extension plus that inflationary factor. In Illinois, the unit school district is a less common form of school district, and so when we compare ourselves, we need to compare ourselves to the combined elementary and high school districts. So this chart represents the orange columns are unit school districts, the blue is elementary school districts, and the red are their high school districts. So taking the combined tax rate of the more common elementary high school district combinations, we have the sixth lowest tax rate in the county. Another group that we can compare ourselves is to our peer group, and we use, you'll see these in other presentations. These are similar unit school districts, so we reach outside our specific area of Lake County, that are similar in population wealth, demographics, and district type. So in comparing ourselves to this peer group or benchmark group, we compare favorably in our tax rate. Our expenditures for last fiscal year were about $91 million. In looking at our expenses, schools are a people business. Teachers, administrators, bus drivers, paraprofessionals make up a big portion of our expenditures. So salaries and benefits account for approximately 61.4% of our annual budget. You can see the other expenses are broken down by purchase services, supplies and materials, capital outlay, dues and fees, and non-capitalized equipment. Dues and fees at $11.6 million represents our special ed tuition as well as our debt payments. This chart demonstrates our expenses broken down by function or purpose for the past 7 years. The purple section represents the amount of the expenses that went towards instructional costs. So these are teacher salaries, textbooks, computers, general supplies for the classroom, but expenses that are directly related to the classroom. The red bars represent the support services for the school district, and this represents anything from social workers, administrators, the bus drivers, the maintenance, paying the utilities on the in the buildings, food service. Those are all considered to be support services. The blue bars represent our debt payment. So comparing our operating expenses to our peer school districts, we are the blue, kind of the blue heavy dashed line in the middle. And our operating expense per pupil was $13,762. So we're about the middle of our pack with our peer or benchmark unit school districts. The district currently has 3 outstanding bonds. So first, let's discuss the debt service extension-based debt, which are the 2 orange blocks in levy year 15 and levy year 16. Under the property tax extension limitation law, a district may reissue limited bonds that were in place in 1994. So in 1994, the district had a bond payment of $990,000. In 1998, this debt was reissued that resulted in that same payment of $990,000 to make capital improvements. So now, 20 years later, we have the opportunity, if the board chooses, to reissue that debt. One thing that has changed is since 2009, they've allowed an inflationary factor. But between 1994 and 2009, the payment had to be exactly $990,000. So the last payment on that debt will be made next fiscal year. Additionally, the district has 5 years of debt repayment, and these are the blue and red bars, for the 2000 referendum to build Spencer Loomis Middle School North and improvements at Lake Zurich High School. The blue bar represents a portion that was refinanced in 2004, and then the red bars represent the original debt that was issued. In 2013, the district's bond rating by Standards & Poor's was raised to its highest rating of AAA. This slide illustrates the total revenue and expenditures for our 4 operating funds: Education Fund, Operations and Maintenance Fund, Transportation Fund, and IMRF and Social Security Fund. The blue bar represents the revenue, and the green line represents the expenses. So if you look at fiscal year 05, 06, and 07, the district faced difficult challenges when expenditures exceeded revenue. The district took the necessary steps to align expenses with revenue without asking taxpayers for additional funding. The district has had an improving financial picture since then. I just want to point out that if you notice the last couple of years, the line kind of goes peaks and valleys. We have switched to making bus purchases every other year rather than every year. So that peak and valley will continue if we continue that practice of purchasing our buses every other year. School districts that are primarily funded by property taxes receive the vast majority of their revenue 2 times a year in June and September. And you all know that because that's when our property tax bills are due. So the blue bars represent revenue that this is actual to last year. So the blue bars represent the revenue that we received during each of those months. The red bar represents the expenditures we made in each of those months. So you can see there's 2 large bars in June and September when we receive our tax money, but the red bars are sprinkled, are fairly constant throughout the school year because school districts are primarily a people business, and our primary expense is salaries and benefits. So what happens is, we receive money in June, we get the taxes, and then just a couple months later, we receive the second half of our taxes. So the blue solid background represents our fund balance throughout the year. So when we receive the taxes in June and then quickly again receive them in September, our fund balance peaks out in September. And then through the course of the year, from October through May, we're paying our bills and not receiving as much income. And so you can see the fund balance declines until about the 3rd week of May, when we then start receiving our taxes. Annually, the Illinois State Board of Education issues the school district's financial profile to help monitor the finances of school districts and identify which school districts are in or moving towards financial difficulty. Illinois State Board of Education has been monitoring the financial condition of schools districts since the 80s, and it's taken different forms, and currently it's called the Financial Profile Score. The goal of the profile score is to objectively assess the financial health of all school districts in order for the public to gain a better understanding of where their school ranks in comparison to others. And this information is available on the State Board's website. So the score results in a designation of either financial recognition, financial review, financial warning, or financial watch. So each of these 5 categories are ranked on a score of 1 to 4, 4 being the highest. So currently our profile score is 4.0, which would be a perfect score, and that places us in the recognition category. The district has been in recognition since 2009 and has had a perfect score since fiscal year 2011. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lyle Erstead, who's going to speak to you about our facilities.
Thank you, Vicki. Now I'd like to walk you through your district and the buildings that you know very, very well. These next few slides as we go through, we enlisted the help of DLA Architects in 2015 to be able to do a facility assessment and a life safety study. That is required to be done in every 10 years. The only school that was not done was the high school because they were 5 years into their life safety study. When they were done with their findings, they reported that to the Facilities Committee, which is a committee of the Board of Education. That is composed of 2 board members, the superintendent, the assistant superintendent for business and operations, the assistant superintendent for curriculum, and then myself as the director of facilities. We reached out to not only our architectural firm to assist us with this, but we also enlisted the help of our mechanical and electrical and plumbing engineering firm, also our civil engineering firm, and also a financing group. The life safety inspection, as I mentioned, included all the schools but the high school, and the definition for a life safety inspection is given for you in the slide here. Early on at one of our first meetings, we wanted to develop a rubric that would allow us to be able to make decisions which would be logical and we could use as a means for sharing with the public. We developed what is called a methodology for prioritization, which you see before you. Just a couple of comments. Impact on creating a culture of learning. Learning is the core of our mission, and therefore the facilities should inspire education. Immediate need, that is if things like if a roof is leaking, it needs immediate replacement or repair. Mandated or code required, that's the life safety inspection, that's where that came into play. Security, we all want secure buildings for our children, and that was one of the features that we wanted to treat very, very highly. Form follows function. It's an architectural firm or an architectural phrase. It means that what the building, how it looks, should follow what's happening inside the building. The building should help inspire learning, and that's our goal. Parity and equity, though these 2 terms might be quite similar, parity would mean that if we started, say, a STEM class in one middle school, we would want to do that in both. Equity is based upon the building, its age, its occupants, etc. And then finally, community value. This is not only the value that our facilities bring to the community, but what our community values in its educational facilities for their children. So our goal was to evaluate proposed capital improvement projects in an objective manner that could easily be explained and would align with our district mission. Now what I would like to do is just walk you through some of our schools. Again, some of them you know very, very well as your children have been attending them. Let's begin with Isaac Fox Elementary School, built in 1993, houses K through 5th grade. We've just got some basic information on these introductory slides. Isaac Fox, as far as their capital needs, when they did the life safety and the facility assessment, we broke down the costs associated with these schools into life safety and maintenance, capital improvement, and then finally air conditioning. Just a couple of comments regarding this particular slide. First of all, there's no inflation built into these numbers. These numbers were, for the capital improvements and life safety and maintenance, were developed in 2015. The air conditioning numbers come from a study done in 2013. Again, there was no inflation built into that, though the number does include the replacement of aging equipment. The projects that you see listed here are not intended to be exhaustive. They're just representative of the types of needs that each of the buildings will have. And finally, the facility assessment was not an environmental study, so it does not include the abatement of certain materials in some of our buildings. May Whitney Elementary, for those of you who are new to the district, May Whitney Elementary was the former high school, with the oldest structure being built in 1929. It houses K through 5th grade. May Whitney's capital needs. Sarah Adams Elementary School on Old Mill Grove Road houses K through 6th grade. its capital needs. Seth Payne Elementary School. It's unique in a couple of different ways. It was a school that was rebuilt after a tornado went through in 1967. It also has, it's the only school that has a basement, cafeteria, and kitchen. Its capital needs. Notice under capital improvement, we've included an amount which would allow us to build an addition onto that building to bring the cafeteria above grade along with the kitchen in order to address some accessibility issues. Spencer Loomis Elementary School, built in 2003, houses K through 5th grade. Its capital needs. Middle School North, built the same time as Spencer Loomis in 2003, houses 6th grade through 8th grade. Its capital needs. Middle School South was built in 1993 at the same time as Isaac Fox Elementary School. It houses 6th through 8th grade. And its capital needs. One comment that you see in both the Middle School North and Middle School South is the creation of a STEM lab. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The Lake Zurich High School, which you sit in tonight, built in 1971, it houses 9th through 12th grade and also provides educational spaces for our transitional students in our special education program. And the high school's capital needs. The administrative building, located on Old Rand Road, houses the offices of the superintendent, curriculum, business and finance, human resources, and special education. I couldn't find a specific year when it was built. We believe it was sometime in the mid-1970s. Its capital needs. You'll notice that under capital improvement, or the final dollar amount, it only represents the cost for replacing that building due to space constraints. And then a summary slide. We, again, divided up between life safety and maintenance, capital improvements, and air conditioning. We also included a fee for architectural, engineering fees, along with construction contingencies that would come up during the course of construction. So our grand total is $86,711,280. I would like now turn it back to Vicki, and she will walk you through some funding opportunities.
So the Facility Committee, through its work, identified options for the Board of Education to consider to fund the maintenance and improvements to district facilities. The district is in a fortunate position to have a number of options to consider. Each option has implications for what can and cannot be accomplished and the time it would take to be able to complete the work. Each option is not mutually exclusive. So option A is to use the current operating budget for major life safety maintenance and capital improvements. Currently, we're able to fund about $3.3 million in capital-type projects each year. Option B would be to reissue debt under the debt service extension base. So those were those two orange bars on that debt service graph chart where we would be making the final payment next year. This could be done without an increase in the tax rate, and there's a couple options on how you could approach this. If you remember, they originally issued that debt in 1998 for 20 years. If we took that option, we would be able to generate about $15.5 million. We believe the direction that the board will be taking, and a more prudent direction, is to look at this periodically and have the opportunity to have an influx of revenue to address the most urgent projects at that time. So if we did this more often, we could generate about $4.5 million every 4 years. Option C would be to reissue the existing debt that represented the blue and the red bars on that graph. That would be the expiring debt from the construction of Spencer Loomis Middle School North and the additions to the high school. This could be accomplished with no increase in tax rate, but would require a referendum approval. This could generate up to $70.3 million. Option D would be would result in an increase in the tax rate and also would require voter approval. And in this option, we could generate more than $70.3 million. So taking a little bit closer look at each of these options, I'm not going to read the slides to you, but option A represents the practice of continuing the $3.3 million or what we can afford going forward to continue to address our facility needs. So this would address the most currently identified, the most urgent life safety projects and select high priority capital improvement projects. But there's many items that we would not be able to address for a long time. So through this current, as we called it, pay-as-you-go process, we're looking at approximately 13 years to complete the list of identified projects that we've already identified. Option B, which was the option to reissue debt under the debt service extension base, has many of the same implications as to what we can and cannot address, but what would reduce the timeline to approximately 9 years since we would receive this influx of revenue to address some projects more quickly. Option C would require voter approval and would coincide with expiring debt, and the district could access up to $70.3 million. But this would be able to address all of the currently identified life safety items, majority of the capital improvement projects, implement many 21st century improvements, and provide greater equity and parity across all district buildings. There would be items that we would have to forego, lower priority projects. If this funding became available, we believe that you could accomplish the work in approximately 4 to 6 years. Option D, which was new financing with voter approval, would pretty much accomplish everything that we've identified as projects. What we would not address is only projects not selected for completion at this time. This would have a similar timeline to option C, approximately 4 to 6 years. We would just be able to complete more projects. So the district is in a strong, stable financial position. As our district facilities age, they are in need of maintenance and life safety work. There is an opportunity to improve our learning environments with a focus on 21st century learning environments through various funding options that could complete all or some of the work.
Good evening. One of the important responsibilities of a district is to identify the learning skills and content knowledge that students should have when they graduate from the district. And so we've been looking, or all districts are looking, at making sure that we address those skills known as the 21st century skills. Craig Gerald published a report in July 2009 titled Defining a 21st Century Education. In this report, Gerald outlines 5 trends that are changing the skills students need to develop in order to thrive personally and professionally in the 21st century. The first trend is automation. Automation is more than just replacing human limbs on an assembly line. Computers are also capable of doing some thinking tasks. Think about making airline reservations. How many of you used to make a phone call to schedule a flight or go to an employee at the airport for a boarding pass? How many of you used an accountant before TurboTax? Any job where information can be digitized and key tasks can be broken down into a set of predictable rules is vulnerable to automation. Globalization is another factor influencing our world. Technology and telecommunications have increased competition for skilled and high-paying jobs because people no longer need to be in the same space to work on a project. Technology allows people around the globe to collaborate. The third trend is the workplace changes. We have shifted from an industrial world to a knowledge and service industry. For example, IT companies no longer sell just boxes to corporate clients. They sell information systems and solutions, and they offer to manage those systems. Today's employees, because of the downsizing in middle management, are also expected to take more responsibility for managing their own work. The fourth trend is personal responsibility. Not only do individuals need to be more self-directed in the workplace, but individuals need to understand and take increased responsibility for health care and financial planning for the future. The fifth trend is demographic changes. Did you realize that by 2030, 1 of every 5 U.S. residents will be 65 or older? Fewer of us will have to support more of us, and this causes concern with maintaining economic growth. In addition, today's young people can expect to live in communities and work in companies that are much more diverse. Students will need to learn how to interact effectively with more diverse groups of people. Communication, collaboration, and creativity will be increasingly important skills to have. Human capital is a company's greatest asset. Companies recruit employees who are willing to learn and dismiss those who are unwilling to or cannot learn the skills needed. Our students will need to be continuous learners. This graphic is a nice representation of not only the content that students need to learn, but of the skill set that they will need to have when they graduate from the district and then move on to the workplace or to college. So we know that students need content information, and they also need the critical thinking skills and communication, collaboration, citizenship, but we need to accomplish that through student-centered learning, interdisciplinary content explorations, and we need to be able to infuse technology and connect their learning to the real world. So how does Lake Zurich address these multiple needs in order to make sure that our students can thrive in the 21st century? First of all, we continue to be committed to our mission statement. We know that students need to be continuous learners who are responsible, caring citizens. That means we must address those 21st learning skills, and we know that they also need to develop deep understanding of content. So in addition to studying what those 21st century skills are, we use the Illinois Content Learning Standards, which identify the content knowledge that students should master by the end of their 12th grade year. As you may be aware, the state adopted new standards in math and English language arts in 2010, science and physical education in 2014, and social science and fine arts in 2016. These standards guide the curriculum development and revision process in District 95. In addition to the content knowledge identified in those standards, the standards have also begun to identify some of the process or 21st century skills. For example, engineering practices are a key component of the science standards. Developing an argument is a key standard in English language arts, and problem solving is part of the mathematical practices. This slide illustrates the 4 phases we use to develop curriculum in the district. The district believes that in order to develop a challenging curriculum for our students, we need to have a diverse team of teachers and administrators representing all grade levels and buildings. We bring this group of educators together during the 4 phases of this design process. During the first phase, We study the standards, we study the 21st century learning skills and best practice in that content area to make sure we have clarity about what students should know and be able to do. In the second stage, these teams of teachers and administrators design the actual units of study, begin to explore potential resources that will be needed by students and teachers in order to achieve the performance standards we have identified. And we look at things like technology, but we also begin to look at the kinds of assessments that we need to ask students to participate in so that we know whether or not they have achieved the content and the skill set that we need them to acquire. During Phase 3, we start to pilot the curriculum, and we also begin to have professional development opportunities for all staff who are going to implement the curriculum. So by the end of Phase 3, we have piloted the units, we can go back and revise before we go to full implementation, and we have professional development in place. In the final phase of the process, we go to full implementation, where across a grade level or a discipline, we have implemented the curriculum, and during this phase, we begin to gather data from student assessments in order to determine whether or not our curriculum is achieving its intended purpose. So some of the resources we need to continue to explore is designing those performance assessments that look different than paper and pencil tests. We have to ask students to apply their knowledge to new situations to know that they deeply understand it and they can begin to develop their problem-solving skills. But another key component for us is also searching for those digital resources that students can use to curate and find information. We want to dismiss this idea amongst our students that a textbook holds the single answer to any solution or to any problem. We want them to be effective evaluators of content so that they have a variety of resources available to them. And part of providing them those learning opportunities means that we have to have a variety of resources for them to use during that learning process. Crystal Stecker, the Director of Technology, is going to talk a little bit more about some of the other technology that's needed when we are redesigning those learning experiences.
Thank you, Jody. As we plan spaces for 21st century learning, it is important that we consider the design of our digital learning space as well as the physical classroom. This slide shows how deployment strategies for computers have changed over time, and the evolution of technology here in District 95 has followed much this same path. The first major infusion of computers in schools started about 25 years ago in the form of a computer lab and then multiple labs in a school. Technology was a very separate and distinct learning experience, which required students to leave their classrooms in order to use that technology. In 1993, the district wrote our first technology plan, which allocated almost $4 million over 3 years and provided the basic cabling infrastructure that is still in use in our schools today. This plan also provisioned clusters of 3 to 4 computers in classrooms. Circa 2002, 2003, as wireless technology became more available, we transitioned to laptops and then to carts of laptops that could be shared amongst classrooms. The key element of this phase is that technology became linked to the classroom and could be better integrated into instruction. In 2012, the Board of Education approved the Mobile Learning Initiative. This is a 3-year phased rollout which provided an iPad to every middle school and high school student for his or her learning. The defining element of this phase is that technology is now linked directly to the student and encourages learning beyond the classroom, anytime, anywhere. As we move into the 4th phase, we realize that there are times that our students may, in fact, need multiple devices. For instance, now that our students have an iPad, how do they display their screen to a small group or to the whole classroom. Students now need tools that previously, like a Apple TV or a projector, that previously were only needed by the classroom teacher. And while an iPad is certainly a powerful tool, there are times where a student needs access to a computer, say specifically for a CAD class or a programming course or a digital art project. And let's not forget the technology that is also probably in everyone's pocket here this evening, or your purse, the cell phone. There is a growing expectation that wireless is available anywhere, anytime. District 95 now has a guest wireless network for students, staff, and visitor access. So we can say that the defining element of this fourth stage is making sure that our learning environments and infrastructure are capable of supporting our students' efficient and effective use of technology. Next, Stacy Noisy, our Director of Curriculum, will speak.
Thank you, Crystal. So once we have the curriculum in place, we have the teachers to teach the students, we have all the technology and resources we need to provide the instruction, we also have to be able to provide a flexible continuum of support so that we're meeting the needs of all students. Our general education program generally meets the needs of about 80% of our students. But there are students in our program, in our district, who need some extra support. Sometimes those are in interventions, sometimes those are in enrichment. The supports that we have in place vary by level, and the decisions are based on the individual student's needs. The interventions that we have sometimes are referred to RTI, or Response to Intervention, and sometimes it's called multi-tiered systems of support. We love our acronyms. But these interventions are meant to be a short-term support so that our students catch up to their same age peers, and it accelerates their growth. That way they can join their peers back in the gen ed classroom with little or no support. We do have some students who need even additional supports to that, and we have programs such as the Gifted Education Program, our English Language Learners Program, our bilingual programs, and special education programs. And those vary in structure based on state and federal guidelines and exist as a continuum of supports. Each of these programs that we have in place require specialized staff and sometimes specialized spaces in order to meet the students' needs. This diagram illustrates our least restrictive environment. It's a continuum of services. As I mentioned before, about 80% of our students fit into that general education red tier that you see. Some of our students need additional supports that can be met by pushing into a general education classroom. That's represented by the orange bar and the yellow bar. Those happen in a regular classroom space, but may require the aid of an additional staff member who has specialized certification to help meet that student's needs. Some students need some additional support outside the general education classroom. Represented here by the green bar and the blue bar, those generally happen in another space. And you see the pink and the purple are when students need some extreme supports, often outside the general ed placement. So that might be a separate school, or hospital placement, or homebound tutoring. We also meet students' social and emotional needs with a series of interventions, as illustrated here by the diagram that goes from the green, which is the primary interventions, down to the red, which are more intensive, individualized support. This is done with often staff who have received additional training or specialized certification, and sometimes with more intensive interventions also require specialized spaces. With the implementation of Senate Bill 100, the district has changed its behavior policy. Our past practices, and those practices that have been followed for more than 50 years, include progressive discipline, which means the first offense equals a certain disciplinary action, and the second offense might be even more. Zero tolerance policies were often in effect, and our behavior intervention or disciplinary management was a one-size-fits-all practice. Our current practice now has been improved to have more behavioral interventions, case-by-case determinations, individualized solutions to meet students' needs, and maximize classroom presence. Now Jody's going to share with you how we help support our teachers through professional development.
So a key researcher in education, Dr. John Hattie, has done meta-analysis of those practices that are most likely to positively increase student achievement. And one of the key practices that that has shown to have the largest impact on student achievement is teacher collaboration and professional learning. And so as a district, I am happy to report that we value developing the expertise of all of the adult learners in our organization. And we do that in multiple ways. We have professional development provided during the school day, after the school day, through graduate coursework, et cetera. But that professional learning also requires space. And currently, the only space we have available is the space at Spencer Loomis and Middle School North, the multi-purpose room. And sometimes our adult needs interferes with how the students in those two buildings can also use that multi-purpose room. But we do the best we can with the limited space we have, but that it does continue to be a conflicting need within our district. So, as we redesign the learning experiences that we are providing to students, we are also realizing that the typical classroom that most of us experienced in our K-12 learning is not always going to meet the needs of our current learners. And we are recognizing that we need different spaces for different activities. For example, we need spaces for students to access and analyze information. Sometimes that can happen in a classroom, but sometimes that needs to be more individual space, and we need those multiple resources so that they're looking for a variety of perspectives on content and current issues. We also need space for collaboration and for teams of students to get feedback from one another or experts within the district or outside of the district. And that space, too, sometimes needs to be reconfigured and doesn't look like the typical classroom with the rows of desks. Then we need space if we're asking students to design solutions to problems. They need to be able to have design space and also exhibition space. And that space will require a different type of furniture and a different arrangement than the typical classroom does as well. We are definitely in transition. We certainly have multiple types of spaces within the district. We have some very traditional looking classrooms, and we're starting to work with furniture and arrangements so that we're fostering more of the collaboration and creativity of our students. And we've put together this video to show some of those distinctions in our spaces throughout the district. So one of the spaces that we weren't able to show you, but we will be able to show you in a couple of weeks, and we're very proud to announce, is that we have what we're calling Studio C at the high school. We took the old small auditorium, and we've made it into a collaborative space for students. When we spoke to students at the high school a year ago, one of the areas that they noted needed the most improvement was spaces where they could actually work together, and they pointed to Elo Library as the kind of space that they wanted in their own building. And so in a couple of weeks, right across from the hall, I think it's October 26th, right before the board meeting, we're going to kind of have a grand opening, and we'd invite you to come see that space. It truly is 21st century learning space, and we're really excited to have that for our students here at the high school.